Welcome to AI Podcast. Today, we'll discuss the most important current affairs from the Hindu 19 June 2026 edition, with detailed analysis for UPSC aspirants. When we think about power, we usually picture things we can actually see, right?
Yeah, totally. Like a massive aircraft carrier or a sprawling factory, maybe a physical wall at a border.
Exactly. It's tangible. You can point at it and say, that's power. But then you look at the real forces shaping our world right now, and suddenly that visibility is it's completely gone.
Right. It's very comforting to the human brain to think that way, though. We naturally prefer our threats and our tools to be visible and easily categorized.
Oh, for sure. But whether you're prepping for a high-stakes exam or you just want to be the smartest person in the room, we're trying to navigate a landscape defined by things we can't even see. We're talking about microscopic viruses and visible nuclear isotopes.
Digital data flows, yeah.
Yeah, and the quiet, pervasive creep of inflation. It feels a bit like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands.
It really is the ultimate modern paradox. The most volatile forces we face are entirely invisible, yet the systems we have to build to control them, well, they have to be incredibly precise.
And that's exactly what we're getting into today. We're going to connect the dots between geopolitics, economics, and public health to show you how nations are desperately trying to measure and control the unpredictable.
Right, because the underlying theme across all our sources today is that exact tension. It's humanity's attempt to build frameworks, treaties, and statistical models to cage these invisible forces.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
And let's start with the biggest, most volatile, invisible force on the global stage, which is nuclear material.
Yes.
The massive headline is that U.S. President Trump and Iranian President Pezeshkian have signed an accord to end the West Asia war.
Yeah, it's a monumental shift, and it triggers a 60-day transition period.
Right.
The most immediate impact, though, is the U.S. lifting its naval blockade. That reopens the critical Strait of Hormuz to global shipping.
Which is huge for trade.
Yeah.
But didn't Iran want to charge tolls there?
They did, yeah. Iran had previously floated the idea of imposing tolls on ships passing through the strait, to fund their post-war reconstruction. But under this finalized deal, the strait remains completely toll-free.
Oh, wow. So how are they getting the money then?
Well, there's a separate $300 billion reconstruction fund being established, backed by regional nations. Plus, in return, the U.S. is providing major sanctions relief, which allows Iran to fully resume its oil exports.
Okay, so that handles the economics. But the core of this deal, the actual mechanism that makes the international community willing to back off, is what Iran agreed to do with its nuclear material.
Yes, the downblending.
Right. They agreed to dilute their enriched uranium. I was reading up on the science behind this, and the process is just fascinating.
It really is. So, to understand the mechanism, we have to look at the isotopes. Uranium found in nature is overwhelmingly uranium-238, which is relatively stable. But the fissile isotope, the one that can actually sustain a nuclear chain reaction for a weapon, is uranium-235. And in natural uranium, U-235 makes up only about 0.7%.
So purifying or enriching uranium just means running it through centrifuges to bump up that specific percentage.
Exactly. And Iran's highly enriched uranium is currently stored as a gas, specifically uranium hexafluoride, or UF6.
Okay, got it.
So the dilution process, known as downblending, involves taking these massive steel cylinders of this highly potent UF6 gas, and they place them in an industrial oven called an autoclave.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, they heat them up to around 100 degrees Celsius. Then they pump that heated gas into a junction called a blending tea, where it's mixed with a blend stock. This is usually just natural or depleted uranium gas.
So the goal is to perfectly mix these gases to get the overall concentration of uranium-235 back down below 5%.
That's right, below that 5% threshold.
So is downblending essentially like taking a highly concentrated, dangerous espresso and watering it down into a harmless decaf latte?
That is actually a great way to visualize it. You're taking something highly potent and mixing it with a much larger volume of something inert until the overall mixture is fundamentally changed.
But wait, if they still have the watered-down material, what stops them from just boiling the water back out? If the centrifuges are still sitting there, can't they just re-enrich the gas the moment the inspectors look away?
Well, what's fascinating here is the lengths the IAEA goes to in order to ensure that can't happen.
Okay.
First off, the mixing process itself is monitored by an OLUM, that's an online enrichment monitor.
What does that do?
So uranium-235 emits a highly specific energy pulse, a unique radiation signature. The monitor is basically tuned to listen only to that exact frequency as the gas flows through the pipes.
Wow.
Yeah, if the concentration gets too high, the noise spikes, and the system automatically triggers fail-safe valves that shut off the entire flow.
So it's literally measuring the invisible energy signature of the gas in real time.
Exactly. And this effectively extends the breakout time, which is the time it would take Iran to enrich enough material for a weapon. But to address your question about reversing the process, the final step is what creates the real bottleneck.
Oh. What's the final step?
The downblended UF6 gas is moved to a reconversion plant where it reacts with steam and hydrogen. This chemical reaction strips away the fluorine atoms and replaces them with oxygen, turning the gas into uranium dioxide, UO2, which is a dark, heavy powder.
Ah, so you can't run powder through a centrifuge.
Exactly. You cannot enrich UO2 powder directly. If Iran wanted to reverse the process, they'd have to build a massive conversion plant to turn that powder back into UF6 gas first.
And I'm guessing that's not something you can just hide in the basement.
Not at all. Those conversion plants emit specific chemical signatures that are easily detected by satellites and ground inspectors. So the chemical reconversion creates a physical barrier that makes a sudden reversal painstakingly difficult and highly visible.
That is wild. So if the global stage is moving from a physical naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz to an invisible chemical lock on nuclear material, we're actually seeing a similar shift in global trade, aren't we?
We really are. The nature of blockades is moving from the physical to the invisible.
Right, because the recent war really terrified Gulf nations into diversifying their export routes. They realized the danger of relying on a single physical choke point.
Oh, absolutely. The UAE managed to maintain about half of its pre-war oil output because they had the foresight to build the Fujairah oil terminal.
And that connects via pipeline right over the mountains, right? Bypassing the Strait of Hormuz entirely.
Yes. And Saudi Arabia's economy remains surprisingly resilient, too, because they push oil across the country to the Yanbu terminal on the Red Sea. But nations like Qatar, who were stuck deep inside the Persian Gulf without alternative overland routes, they were essentially trapped.
But while nations are figuring out how to bypass physical geography, the global trade market is busy building new invisible walls. The sources point out a staggering shift toward non-tariff barriers, or NTBs.
Yeah, since 1995, when the WTO was established, tariffs have actually halved. But NTBs now affect roughly 90% of all global trade.
90%.
It's a profound evolution in economic statecraft. Tariffs are simple taxes, they're highly visible, you can model their impact on a spreadsheet. But NTBs, they are regulatory mazes.
Right, like environmental rules.
Exactly. The EU is arguably the biggest deployer of these, using carbon taxes and incredibly strict chemical safety regulations. And the US uses strategic export controls, particularly limiting rivals' access to tech and semiconductors under the guise of national security.
And India is doing it too, expanding quality control orders on electronics and machinery. So if tariffs are just the press release and NTBs are the actual wall, are free trade agreements basically obsolete unless they address these invisible regulations?
That's spot on. Modern trade diplomacy is no longer about shaving percentage points off taxes. It's about negotiating laboratory testing standards, mutual recognition of safety certifications.
The really boring, tedious compliance stuff.
Exactly. And a perfect example of this is the new pact between India and the UK. On July 15th, they're implementing a revised Social Security Agreement, the Double Contribution Convention.
Oh yeah, this stood out as a huge win. It exempts Indian firms from paying UK Social Security for temporary workers for up to 5 years, right?
As long as they're continuing to pay into the Indian system, yes. It's projected to save Indian companies about $500 million.
$500 million. And that's not from a tariff reduction. It's coming from harmonizing an invisible administrative regulation.
Right. An Indian IT worker sent to London for a 3-year project shouldn't have to pay into a UK pension system they'll never see a dime of. Removing that administrative friction is the new frontier of global trade.
So if the global market is hiding behind these invisible regulatory walls, India can't possibly compete unless it actually knows what its own domestic baseline is, which explains why the government is overhauling how it measures its macroeconomic data.
Yes. India's Ministry of Statistics just executed a massive overhaul to align with international best practices. They updated the base years for gross domestic product and the index of industrial production to 2022-23.
And the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, has been updated to a 2024 base year.
Right. And they're finally introducing a producer price index, a PPI, to eventually phase out the outdated wholesale price index.
Updating the base year is like finally updating the GPS on your phone. If you're navigating 2026 with the map from 2012, you're going to crash.
Yeah.
We have to know what things actually cost right now.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what things cost right now is heavily dictated by another invisible force: climate change.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a bad habit of talking about climate change as an abstract problem for the year 2070, but accurate CPI data shows it is a persistent, end-of-the-month inflation issue today.
The data on this from the World Bank is just brutal. They're warning that climate change could cause a 2.8% loss to India's GDP by 2050. And the sources show it's already acting as a regressive tax right now.
Just look at the causal chain. Erratic monsoons and extreme heat waves damage crop yields. That supply shock hits the local Kirana store, driving up the price of basic vegetables.
And simultaneously, that same heat wave forces everyone to run their AC units, spiking power demand.
Exactly. Utilities scramble to buy expensive spot market coal to keep the grid from collapsing, and those emergency costs hike up consumer electricity tariffs.
And then there's the tanker economy for water, which disproportionately hurts the poor. When municipal pipes run dry, families in informal settlements are forced to buy drinking water from private tanker vendors at massively inflated prices.
It literally costs a premium just to survive. Which brings us to the industrial side. To stop this climate-driven inflation, heavy industries have to decarbonize. Take the steel industry, which accounts for 8% of all global emissions.
Right, because the traditional method uses blast furnaces powered by coal. And from what I understand, the coal isn't just there to make the furnace hot, it's actually a chemical requirement.
That's the crux of the problem. Iron ore is found as iron oxide. To get pure iron, you have to strip the oxygen atoms away. The carbon in the coal acts as a reducing agent, binding with the oxygen to create CO2.
Leaving the pure iron behind.
Right. So to transition to green steel, you have to swap that coal for green hydrogen, which binds with the oxygen to create water vapor instead.
So you can't just plug a traditional steel plant into a solar panel. You have to fundamentally redesign the core chemical process. No wonder the transition is severely constrained.
It's incredibly expensive. Only about $20 billion has been invested globally, and green steel is projected to account for less than 4% of global output by 2030.
Wow. So you've got this massive economic machine trying to retool itself, but at the ground level, the government is juggling how to protect citizens from invisible threats. Which brings us to the recent legal battle over the Telegram ban.
It's a classic modern dilemma between security and digital rights. The Indian government temporarily blocked Telegram under Section 69A of the IT Act, labeling it the new dark web.
Because cybercriminals and exam paper leak operators were using it ahead of the NEET re-exam, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But the Delhi High Court scrutinized the proportionality of a platform-wide ban. It touches heavily on the Anuradha Boston precedent.
The Supreme Court ruling about internet restrictions.
Right, and specifically Article 19(1)A and G, the freedom of speech, and the right to practice any profession.
With Telegram, isn't a total ban like shutting down an entire national highway just because a few cars are speeding? I mean, where do we draw the line between security and freedom?
Yeah.
The court explicitly asked if it's fair to stop 150 million users just because of one exam leak.
It forces us to look at the bluntness of our legal tools. The architectural reality of Telegram makes targeting specific encrypted channels very difficult, so the government reaches for the blunt instrument of a total ban.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Now, moving from digital viruses spreading through chat apps to actual biological ones, Kerala is currently battling another outbreak of the Nipah virus.
Yes, and just like with cybercrime, the focus is entirely on stopping the spread before it spirals. Nipah is a designated high-threat pathogen.
And the natural reservoir is the Indian flying fox bat, right?
Right.
Pteropus medius.
Exactly. The spillover risk is highest between April and September, and Kerala has adopted a really robust One Health strategy. They rely on massive community surveillance to catch the virus in the environment to prevent human-to-human transmission.
So what does this all mean when we look at the broader health data? Because the latest National Family Health Survey, the NFHS-6, shows some mixed progress.
It does. Child vaccination coverage is at a stellar 87%, and child stenting has declined to 29.3%.
Right, but wasting remains unchanged. So medical care isn't fully translating to physical growth. Why is that?
Well, a vaccine is an isolated intervention. Nutrition is a daily, complex behavior heavily influenced by economics. The report highlights the processed food trap and maternal time poverty.
Ah,
A huge percentage of mothers work in the informal economy. Without access to local creches or childcare support, they simply don't have the time to practice optimal complementary feeding.
and when you're exhausted and broke, you reach for whatever processed food is fast and cheap.
Exactly. Which is why the parallel to the Nipah virus response is so important. Just as Kerala needs hyper-local surveillance for a dead bat, solving malnutrition requires localized, culturally grounded health workers, like ASHAs and Anganwadi workers, to provide community-level creches and dietary counseling. You can't just rely on broad mandates.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today, from the microscopic mixing of uranium isotopes and Nipah virus spillovers to the macro-level shifts in global trade routes, climate inflation, and digital rights.
We really have. And, throughout today's deep dive, we've seen humanity's attempt to measure and control the unpredictable, be it nuclear reactions, climate shocks, or viral spillovers. But as our monitoring tools become near perfect, like the online enrichment monitors in a nuclear facility or the new CPI base year, we have to ask, does perfect data actually lead to better human decisions? Or does it just give us the illusion of control while the real vulnerabilities, like maternal time poverty or the informal tanker economy, slip right through the cracks of our spreadsheets?
Man, that's a thought that's going to stick with me. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Keep questioning the data, keep looking for the invisible forces shaping your world, and we'll catch you next time.